Hey guys, welcome back to episode 3 of Crime-Torial or Crime-Torial. Haven't decided if I want to pronounce the middle part on that or not. Today's kind of a fun day to give you a little bit of insight on what's going on in my life. I got engaged Monday and today is Wednesday. Yep. I'm super excited about it. Working on planning my wedding now and all of this, so wish me luck. I'm super excited, super happy, but now I have to plan a wedding, so stress. Anyways, as you notice, I have a new background. This is a tablecloth that I hung with thumbtacks. So today is an interesting episode. We're going to be talking about a serial killer from Indiana. I'm in Kentucky, so this is kind of significant to me because I know where Indiana is. Oh, also, we will be dyeing my hair today with this color conditioner. It's supposed to be used as like a shampoo, but I don't want it to dye all my hair. I just want it to dye those blonde pieces. So that's what we're gonna do. This guy's name is Herbert Richard Baumeister. He was born April 7th, 1947, and he died July 3rd, 1996. I don't want to say relatively recently because that'll show my age, but also not too long ago. His other nicknames are the I-70 Strangler. There's actually another name attached to that nickname, the I-70 Strangler, but he is one of them. He is one of the I-70 Stranglers. So a little info on Herb. He lived in Westfield, Indiana, and his span of crimes was during the 1980s all the way up until 1996. Here we go, guys. Oh my gosh. Y'all, I don't know what I'm doing. Brad Mondo. I'm so sorry. His alias was the name Brian Smart. Stop it. I'm really bad at this, guys. He died at the age of 49 from suicide. And he actually, interestingly enough, founded the Save-A-Lot store, thrift store chain up in Indianapolis in 1988. It's not the Save-A-Lot store, like grocery store that you might be thinking of. It was a thrift and retail store. Oh my gosh, it's getting everywhere. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know if it's going on enough. He is the oldest of 4 children. His dad's name was Herbert. His mother's name was Elizabeth Baumeister. His younger siblings were Barbara, Brad, and Richard. What I thought was funny about this was that Herb's middle name is Richard. So they named him and gave him his middle name and then was like, oh yeah, we're also going to name your younger brother Richard as well. So I thought that was funny, but maybe that's just me. So he had a normal childhood, but it got weird really quick. There were rumors that his dad was physically abusive to him, but we really don't have any proof to back that claim up. In his adolescence, he began exhibiting extreme antisocial behaviors. He had no interest in girls. He had no friends, and his acquaintances later recalled young Herbert playing with dead animals and urinating on his teacher's desks, or specifically one teacher's desk. Also, one time he picked up a dead crow on the way to school and carried it in his pocket and put it on his teacher's desk when he got to school. When the teacher wasn't looking, he just put it on her desk or something, which is weird to say the least. A close friend stated that Herbert often said that he, quote, pondered what it would be like to taste human urine. Blech. Oh my gosh, y'all. This sounds so gross. Eee. I'm missing so many sections of Brad. I'm so sorry. So in his adolescence as well, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teen and multiple personality disorder, but there's no record that he received any further treatment for those diagnoses. And his diagnosis was hardcore hidden by his dad. His dad was like, yeah, we know something's wrong with him, but we're not gonna do anything, and literally hid it. It wasn't in his records or anything. I hope this doesn't dye my whole head gray because that's gonna be a real issue here. So moving into adulthood, and I'm just gonna put this all over my head, y'all. In 1961, He attended high school at North Central High. He was active in biology, geology, government and international relations, and chess club. But despite being a part of all of those sciences, he never seemed to be part of the in crowd. Same. I'm joking, I think. I don't know. If anyone from my high school is watching this, was I popular? So he was kind of separating himself, like kind of his fault that he wasn't part of the in crowd. There's no way I'm gonna get good coverage with this. This is probably the worst way that I could apply this. Anyways, so he constantly separated himself. And then in 1965, 4 years later, he attended Indiana University. But he ended up dropping out after one semester. Then he returned again 2 years later in 1961, but still didn't finish. He attended Butler University in 1971 for one semester. With his major, he stayed like in the sciences because his dad was a doctor and his dad had his own practice, but he didn't want to be a doctor. He did want to do something with the sciences because he felt like that's what would make his dad proud of him. Still didn't finish school at Butler, only went for one semester. So essentially he went to 3 different schools within the span of 7 years. Commitment issues? Maybe. So after his school endeavors, he drifted through a series of jobs. With these jobs, he's considered to have a strong work ethic, but that was paired with increasingly bizarre behavior, in that he became more of a loose cannon. Dear God, I hope this works. He married Juliana Sater, or Julie Sater, in November of 1971. If you remember, he went to that one semester at Butler University in 1972. So she may have convinced him to go back to school, and then he was like, yeah, not bye. But I don't know anything about that. Herb and Juliana had 3 children. Marie was born in 1979. Eric was born in 1981. And Emily was born in 1984. So once he had his kids, his like loose cannon behaviors stopped, supposedly. He's reported to have been a great dad to his kids, he was involved in their kids' sports, he was well liked in the community. But during all this, later on, Julie would state that they had only been sexually intimate 6 times over the course of their 25 years of marriage, which is a little bit weird. But, you know, whatever. He supposedly was insecure of his skinny. He went through a series of different jobs through his life. An odd instance during a job was when he offered to drive his boss, Gary Donna, from the paper company that he worked for, offered to drive Donna and their friends from work to an Indiana University football game. Which is like, fine, that's cool if you want to offer to drive. But what was weird about this was that he showed up in a hearse to drive them to the game. People were pulling off the road as he was driving to pay respect because obviously they thought it was a funeral procession. All the while, Herbert was laughing his head off while driving this hearse because he thought it was so funny. Odd sense of humor, but you know. Then he left the paper company and started working for the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, the BMV. Some states call it the DMV. He urinated on his boss's desk, but they didn't know it was him. They just found urine on the boss's desk. He didn't get fired until he was found having urinated on a letter that was addressed to the governor of Indiana. So after he did that, they were like, oh wait, that kind of explains the urine on the desk. In the 1970s, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital by his father, and his wife Julie was like totally on board with him being committed. She stated that he was, quote, hurting and needed help. So this is interesting because he was like extremely intelligent, but like obviously he didn't finish college, like kind of weird because he was supposed to be super intelligent but is crazy. So his father commits him and then tries to cover up the fact that his son is in a crazy house even though he committed him. So he gets out, and then in 1985 he is caught drinking and driving, and he's charged with a hit and run. This hit and run was done in a stolen vehicle. So not only was he charged with the hit and run, he was charged with vehicle theft and concealment conspiracy to commit theft, because in this car that he stole, they found a ski mask and tools to commit a robbery. He fights this ruling of conspiracy theft and he wins that. So he's only charged with DUI and vehicle theft. Later on that same year, in 1985, his dad dies, Father Herbert, Dr. Herbert, and his mom inherits, Elizabeth, some money. She comes into some money from his insurance. So with that, Herb borrows $4,000 from his mom, with which he founded the Save-A-Lot thrift and consignment store chain in Indianapolis in 1988. Not only was this in part funded by his father's death, this was in part also funded by the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis. So the first year, the shop does really well. Like, they make $50,000 in profit the first year. And so with that, they opened up a second store in Columbus, Ohio. They're doing pretty great. So with all this money, him and his family move to Hamilton County, where they bought Fox Hollow Farms. It is a 18.5-acre semi-mansion, complete with 4 bedrooms, an indoor swimming pool, and a riding stable on the grounds. Pretty nice get up there. After his DUI and all of that, and after they moved, he became an affluent member of society and was like super well liked in the community again. Despite this, they were having marital problems again. Julie and Herb were. This is kind of weird information, but Julie states that she never saw her husband naked, like ever. He would change in the bathroom and would always wear pajamas to bed. So the couple split a few times over their marriage, but they ended up coming back together. Not only were the marital problems just between them emotionally, but it could be seen in the home. The grounds were unkept, the rooms were cluttered and super messy. All this was happening during his homosexual murder spree. Dun, dun, dun. Moving on to the investigation. In early 1990s, the Indianapolis PD began investigating the disappearances of some local gay men that were all similar age, similar height and weight. They kind of looked alike. So the oldest son of Julie and Herb was Eric. So one day, Eric's playing in the backyard, right? And he finds a human skull in the backyard. He goes to his mother and is like, "Hey mom, here's a skull." She's shocked and confused and then confronts Herb when he gets home from work. When she does this, Herb makes up like a ton of excuses and is like, "That's normal," basically is what he says. It's like, "Oh, it's supposed to be there. I put it there." He says that it's an old cadaver from his dad's medical practice because his dad was a doctor. So he says that like he put it in the garage first. It's this skeleton. Put it in the garage first, but then he was cleaning out the garage and then he didn't know where to put it, so he just buried it in the backyard. And then in 1992, a man going by the name Tony Harris called the police to report that a man named Brian Smart had killed his friend. So the way that this went down is that Harris was kind of suspicious of Brian. Now, if you remember, Brian Smart is Herbert Baumeister's alias. So Harris was suspicious of Brian, but found him attractive anyways, and went back to his place with him after meeting him at a bar. Julie and the kids were away at the lake with their grandparents. Because of the marital problems, Herb obviously didn't go because he said he had to work, which they believed. So when Harris went, they kind of hung out in the pool room, like in the indoor pool, and Harris made a discovery that was very unnerving. There were mannequins everywhere, and they were staged in various interesting and odd poses. When Harris asked Brian, like, "Hey dude, what's with the mannequins?" Initially, Brian said that this was his employer's home. He didn't claim it as his own. So he said that the owner gets lonely and likes to have mannequins to keep him company. Odd. So Brian at some point during the night was like, "Hey man, you ever heard of erotic asphyxiation?" Harris was like, "Yeah, I think so." And then Brian was like, "You should choke me. Just see what it's like." So Harris then choked Brian out first to the point of losing consciousness. He awoke and was like, "Oh man, that's the best feeling ever. Like, oh my gosh, do you wanna do it?" Harris is like, "Yeah, sure man." So Brian then proceeds to choke Harris with a pool hose, or like a garden hose. At that point, it became unconsensual and Harris got out of the situation. I think from what I understand, Harris was like bigger than Brian, and that's like the only reason that he made it out and didn't become a victim himself. So this obviously confirmed Harris's suspicions with Brian and the disappearance of Harris's friend. So he called the police and they told him that if he ever saw Brian again, to call them. That was disgusting. Anyways, Harris did see Brian again, but not romantically. He saw Brian again and then he followed him and got his license plate number and gave it to the police. So while all of this was going on, while Harris was like talking to the police the first time, the front desk clerk at the police station, Connie Pierce, took it upon herself to talk to her friend who was a psychic. Pierce talks to Wanda and tells her some of the details that Tony had shared over the phone about Brian Smart. And this is a quote from Wanda. I wish I had this on recording, but I can't find it. So Wanda says, "I see a man tied to a bed, handcuffed, spread-eagled. I see pictures being taken while he is being strangled. The tongue is swollen, quite long coming out of his mouth, and the eyes. Oh, that's a hell house. Tell Tony never to go there again." That's a little bit weird. So with this license plate number, the police identified this Brian Smart as Herbert Baumeister. So they go to the Save-A-Lot store to talk to him, but instead they end up finding his wife, Julie. So they talk to her and they say, "Hey, your husband's a suspect in a homosexual murder spree." She's in denial and she's completely not convinced that they're telling the truth. They ask her if they can search their house, but both Herbert and his wife, Julie, despite her suspicions, refuse to allow the search of their house. But in 1996, Julie filed for divorce because she was sufficiently frightened by her husband's mood swings and erratic behavior. So when she files for divorce, she thus consents to a search of her house, because she's gonna stick it to him. So the police search covered an area of 18 acres on Fox Hollow Farm while Herbert was away on vacation with his son Eric. They went to the lake. This search turned up the remains of at least 11 men, only 4 initially identified and then 8 eventually identified. So they put out a warrant for Herb Baumeister's arrest, and they were very concerned for Julie's son Eric because he was with him, and they knew that Herb's kind of MO was men, and so obviously they were very concerned for that. So they put out a warrant for Herb's arrest, but he ended up fleeing to Ontario and committing suicide at the Pinery Provincial Park on Lake Huron by shooting himself in the head. I'm gonna go wash this out and see where we're at, and we'll continue when I get back. We back, y'all. See how this turned out. So there's a blonde piece there. Okay, so you can definitely tell that it's kind of gray. Maybe. So Herbert ended up fleeing to Ontario. Now, when he committed suicide, he left a suicide note. You'd think, oh, maybe he said something about his victims that were found in his backyard. This man did not. He blamed, or I guess attributed, his suicide to his failing marriage and failing business, because at this point, like, the business was going down the drain, y'all, because he wasn't able to keep it up. It was getting cluttered. It was no longer a fun place to go for people anymore. He never ended up confessing to the murders, but after his death, he was suspected of killing at least 9 other men, and during the time of his killing spree, bodies were found in rural areas alongside the corridor of Interstate 70 between Indianapolis and Columbus, Ohio. If you remember, that was his route from Save-A-Lot store in Indianapolis to the Save-A-Lot store in Columbus, Ohio. Later on, eyewitnesses identified Baumeister leaving a bar in 1983 with a man named Michael Riley, who was later found dead. Riley was strangled to death and left nude or partially nude in a river. So that's Herb Baumeister. After some digging and some more research, I found an interview with him talking about how a raccoon was dead on the side of the road. The road painting company just like painted over it. And he talks about how he had his camera with him and how he snapped a picture of it. because he's like, I've got my camera with me. This is cruel and unusual. I'll snap a picture of it. So I'm going to put that link in the description below. It's a YouTube video. Interesting if you want to watch it and see the weight that he attributes to animals, but knowing all the while he is killing humans and does not care. In that same YouTube video, if you go down to the comments and stuff, there was someone who commented and said that they were his neighbor growing up and they just thought that he was like a super weird guy. And I thought that was interesting to hear like someone's actual experience with him. So I also ended up finding an interview that was done with Julia, his wife, kind of about their life together, how they met, what was he like at home, all of this stuff, and kind of the whole story from her perspective. And I want to play some of that for you. And I'm also going to put the link down below. But I do want to point out like specific things that she said about him in that interview. Here are some things that Julie talks about.
When I was a sophomore at Indiana University, the IU football team won the right to go to the Rose Bowl. It's game time! And it was during the preparation to go to the Rose Bowl that I actually met Herb. My first impression was he was a lot of fun to be with. I enjoyed myself more when I was in his company. Most of the things we did were just driving around, maybe getting a Coke here or there. I just had a good time. Yeah, college is a great time. I wish I could go back. Sometimes much better than adulthood. When our family came along, Herb was very involved with the kids. I think we had very family-oriented values. You know, we didn't have candlelight dinners, and we didn't run off on romantic weekends together. We were much more family love. I called Mary Wilson back several times and really challenged them to say, I don't believe you. This isn't the person I know. This is not someone I have ever in my life seen yell to the point of slapping his children. I have never seen him throw anything. He has never even come close to even giving me a bruise by holding my arm. And you're trying to tell me he killed someone? It didn't add up. Extremely concerned that of Herb's stability, and absolutely frantic that our son was with him. I told them the story about my son having found bones in the backyard. One of the gentlemen looked down and said, "Why, I think this is a bone." And he picked something up. And I think from that point, I was total blur.
So guys, that is Herbert Baumeister and his wife Julia. Crazy story, but eventful, to say the least. So thank you all for watching me attempt to dye my hair. I think it worked. Yeah, I think it worked. They're still a little blonde, but I think it worked. And if not, we'll actually use it as a shampoo this time. So thank you guys for watching.